Hey, good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, aloha. I'm Brigadier General Mike Smith, USINDOPACOM J6, and it's my sincere pleasure to host and moderate the Military Department C4 Command and Control Communications and Cyber Modernization panel. So the purpose of this panel is really for the Senior Service Communicators to share current and emerging service-specific C4 modernization and transformation initiatives in support of USINDOPACOM's area of responsibility. The objective of this panel is to enhance situational awareness and situational understanding of how these initiatives across the services nest and/or create value in support of USINDOPACOM. Accordingly, as the J6, we are developing a digital transformation strategy that enables data-centric, combined joint all-domain command and control with and through our alliances and partnerships. This is to help our mission for deterring aggression, prevent and responding to crisis, and when called upon to prevail in conflict. Desired state at the end of this session is really assured C4 and situational awareness and understanding. And when I say assured, I really mean agile, resilient, survivable, and defensible network and data-centric infrastructure and services in support of our warfighters and the USINDOPACOM area responsibility. So with that said, it's also my pleasure to introduce our four distinguished guests from across the services. First, Lieutenant General John B. Morrison, Jr., Headquarters, Department of the Army, Deputy Chief of Staff, G6. Beside him is Mr. Brian Campo, United States Department of Homeland Security, United States Coast Guard, Deputy Assistant Commandant for C4 and IT, and Deputy Chief Information Officer. Next to him is Mr. Robert Warborski, Naval Information Warfare Systems Command, Chief Engineer. And lastly, on the end, but not least, is Colonel Nathan Vosters, Space Forces Indo-Pacific Director of Requirements, Resources, and Programs, J8. So please join me in giving them a warm welcome to this panel. So with that said, let me get started by just setting some atmospherics. So USINDOPACOM, the combatant command that's challenged by a tyranny of distance. From the California coast to the western border of India, from the southern Antarctica all the way to the North Pole. We encompass 52% of the world's geography, over 50% of its population, with over 3,000 languages, and 38 allies and partners. And our specific mission is to deter aggression, prevent and respond to crisis, and if necessary, as previously stated, prevail in conflict. We have 4 LOEs in USINDOPACOM. First, build, develop, employ, advance all-domain combat power. Second, strengthen alliances and partnerships. Third, improve theater posture, enabling expanded maneuver across the theater. And fourth, a cross-cutting LOE is to suffuse information operations. With that, as the J6, I've been challenged and asked to do a few things. Develop and operationalize a digital transformation strategy that synchronizes, integrates, and accelerates C4 modernization across the theater. I've also been asked to develop a USINDOPACOM network defense strategy that does the same across cyberspace operations for DoD and non-DoD. And then lastly, I've been asked to enhance the interoperability of our U.S. alliances and partnerships from a C4 perspective. So with that, I have a few questions to start the conversation to achieve all of this. And sir, I'll start with Lieutenant General Morrison. Sir, how is your service, how is the Army tackling any of the DoD's big 6? And those are Zero Trust, ICAM, Comply to Connect, Time Division Multiplexing Elimination, IPv4 to IPv6 transition, and lastly, TLA, Legacy TLA stack replacement. An easy softball, sir. Over to you.
So, can everybody hear me okay? Did everybody get all of those acronyms? Because if you didn't, I can say whatever the heck I want is going to make sense. Yeah, first off, thank you to AFCEA for hosting this great event. Mike, thanks for being the moderator for this panel. I'll offer a few thoughts from an Army perspective, but I believe it's going to tie into the broader joint efforts that we're talking about here inside the Indo-PACOM AOR. First, the Army about 2 or 3 years ago made a conscious decision as we were launching on our most comprehensive network modernization effort to date across all 3 echelons, strategic, operational, and tactical, that we were going to prioritize those modernization efforts where the threat is the greatest. And so we have focused on the Indo-PACOM AOR. Now, the threat truly is a global threat. But sometimes you got to go to the alligator closest to the boat and start really working things. And again, it's across all 3 of the echelons that I mentioned, because modernizing any echelon in isolation, I would submit to you, in today's cloud-enabled global world, is a fool's errand. So, what have we done here? We have implemented all the things that we really need to do to provide a comprehensive defensive cyber overwatch across this theater. We've implemented what we call the Unified Security Incident and Event Management that allows us to see what is happening on the network from the tactical edge. So think of a soldier with a radio in the Philippines with an end user device. We literally can see what is happening with that device all the way up to our regional cyber center here in Hawaii. We've implemented Comply to Connect and a host of other security things that have significantly improved our defensive posture, but just as important, it's improved the quality of the experience that we're providing to our end users inside our Army formations here. I do want to hit one of the new ones, because we just completed a joint Pacific multinational rotation here on the island, 25th Infantry Division, and we implemented what we call command and control fix. We know that the network that we have inside our tactical formations is not ready to fight tonight. So where have we prioritized our efforts? We started with the 101st Air Assault out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and now we have moved to the 25th. And in that exercise, think about what I'm about to describe. Cloud-enabled technologies against an opposing force who's trying to break your network, and they were able to use that while they were actually prosecuting a fight. That is the environment that we need to be moving towards, and I would submit to you that is what the Army envisions from a JADC2 perspective. We just need to move it from being all Army to being much more joint in nature. I look forward to the rest of your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, team, for questions, please feel free to submit them to the website, or at the last 15 minutes of the session, we'll go ahead and take raised hands. If you really have a burning question, as one of the speakers provides comments, feel free to stand up. If you can, keep it to the last 15 minutes. Okay, sir, thank you kindly for all that information, and definitely appreciate the 25th Infantry Division example and recent event. Brian, over to you, sir. So they're really the same thing, those top 6 for DoD directives, securing and defending this theater. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll follow General Morrison's lead. I mean, the security in this domain is paramount for everybody. I think from a Coast Guard perspective, we are seeing it and feeling it in a variety of ways. We've just completed probably the longest technology modernization event in the Coast Guard's history. So we had a 4-year evolution called the Technology Revolution, where we looked at everything from how we're connecting to networks, how we're looking at the security of those networks, thinking about the interactions between us and industry. If you think about some of the other title authorities that Coast Guard has, we have really changed the way that we are thinking about sort of deployed security. We'll talk a little bit about JADC2 and maybe some of the C2 things a little bit later. That certainly comes into it, but I think for us, we started with an idea around how do we start with communication. So you talked a little bit about IPv6, right? So changing the way that we route our networks, changing the way that we deploy our networks. We are in the IPv6 transition, but that is definitely turning out to be a little bit challenging. I think all of us are feeling the long-term domain of IPv6 hanging over our heads. Zero trust there is probably only one buzzword that is higher right now than zero trust, and that's AI, but zero trust absolutely is core to everything that we're doing right now. We're thinking about it not just from the networks, but also from the data. So one of the things that we've started to do with data, with zero trust, is move into the data realm and start thinking about how do we protect the data independent of the systems that it's actually moving through. So we're thinking about user controls, we're thinking about system controls, and we're thinking about data controls. And then I talked a little bit about the network side of things. So TDM elimination, that actually is going pretty well. We have moved just about everything off of old copper onto fiber. That's been really good. That has helped us. We've got one of our technology revolution lines is ubiquitous connectivity. That is everything from shore to deployed to even on our cutters. We are finding more connectivity, more resources for our folks to use than we ever have before. And I'll kind of close it out with the last piece, which is how do we bring this all together into a cohesive effort? That is where it really comes down to industry partnerships, things like working together with the small businesses, the large businesses, with the vendors that are putting out this technology. We are really thinking about how do we build better partnerships with our vendors, how do we bring them inside the fence line, how do we sit and plan with them as we're starting to develop capabilities, and then how do we bring them in when we're starting to lay out technology roadmaps for things like deployed connectivity, for things like securing perimeters and bringing artificial intelligence in so that we can make sure that we secure it as we deploy it. We're really looking for those industry partnerships to really help us along the way.
Yeah, I'll add that I'll start with the easy one. It's TDM, and in the Navy, we've gone quite a long ways. Getting to the 90% solution, I think, is going to be relatively straightforward. There are some unique functionalities that we are really, really struggling with to see how we can get them off of TDM, like 911 calls and things like that. We're working our way through that across the Navy enterprise to go figure that out. I think that TDM, moving from TDM to IP, is not going to be a 100% solution in totality ever, but getting to 99% would be what I would consider to be achieved success. Okay, so that one's off. Zero trust networking, we're doing multiple pilots across the Navy now. We're learning and understanding and thinking about how it fits into a bigger enterprise cyber strategy / architecture. The strategy coming out of the Don CIO called Cyber Ready, Zero Trust is one of the key tenets of that. And we're looking at how we're going to support Cyber Ready in its totality across all of our networks and all of our capability across the board. Comply to Connect, we're up and running on Comply Connect today on our enterprise networks, and we've learned a lot from that capability, and we're ready to take that and even do more with it. And I'd say the bigger cybersecurity perspective in the Navy, I think we're looking at how we integrate cyber across our enterprise. There's lots of tremendous cybersecurity capabilities out there in the Navy. A lot of them are asynchronous and not integrated together. And if we could integrate this together, which is what we're working on, to get us to kind of a platform level DCO and then kind of a enterprise level DCO, then we can unleash AI and ML principles on our cyber state. With all that capability we have out there, I think it will transform us and increase our cyber posture dramatically across the board, and also give us that situational awareness to know where and when we do have a problem. And we will also work and figure out how to address those problems and recover from those situations much, much faster than we ever have in the past. Cool.
Thanks. I would offer a couple things to expound on what my fellow panelists mentioned from the Space Force perspective. I feel like as a service, we are somewhat fortunate in that due to our youth, we're like many young people today, kind of a digital native service. So as we approach the DoD's digital modernization strategy, that's kind of baked into our DNA with where we put people, where we put resources, and how we look at our future programs and augmenting current programs. specifically as we, as a service, highly prioritize the modernization and replacement of our space-based communication systems. And I leave it in kind of a broad way, in space-based communications, boy, that you could drive a truck through that, but the intent there is looking at it as not a military only and not a commercial only, but a hybrid approach so that we can capitalize on the speed of innovation of industry to incorporate cutting-edge technologies at a speed and a pace which keeps us more secure than what our adversaries are trying to do. So it's keeping blue ahead of red. That really looks to me like a hybrid commercial military architecture to use the best approach in the situations where it's demanded and needed, and leverage the innovations that I'm interested in exploring with many of the vendors here throughout the next couple of days, and that we've talked through at the service level prior to this, and then moving forward through system acquisitions.
Gentlemen, thank you for those comments. As you can imagine, across the services, all the feedback that they just shared, all those initiatives sound fantastic. But from fighting from a joint force perspective, it's really finding those gaps and seams over time and space that really enables that C5 ISRT for USINDOPACOM. So this is just the initial conversations. I hope that we continue the cross-service conversations and partnerships as we move forward. As we get ready to move on to the next question, General Morrison, I'm going to shift back down to you, sir. A lot of great feedback, but with all those great modernization initiatives, I'd really have to ask, what are the Army's plans to reduce tech debt and or modernize other legacy infrastructure in USINDOPACOM?
I'm going to take some creative liberty and flip it around a little bit, if that's okay, Mike. I think what you just heard from all four of us is we all generally have the same North Star. And while we may be approaching it slightly differently, we at least are on azimuth to try and get to the same spot. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have to work our way through as a joint and combined force is how do we bring those efforts into complete alignment so we can realize the vision of what CJADC2 really is going to be. And I think that's where, quite frankly, Indo-PACOM can start playing a role helping us move in that direction. I will tell you, as you listen to these modernization efforts, regardless of the service, the biggest thing that we have to work our way through is how do we operationalize the technologies, and then how do we change the culture? Because left to our own devices, if we're not careful, what we will do is take a legacy infrastructure full of tech debt, and we will apply very modern capabilities over the top of it, and we will by default suboptimize. So in the Army, we're working through what that balance is, and it's sort of a paradigm along the lines of we will fix that legacy infrastructure that we have to, but we are focusing like a laser beam on how do we modernize the totality of the network so that we can move forward and get off of legacy approaches, whether it's TDM, whether it's the way that we've done routing in the past, whether it's legacy top-level architectures or TLA stacks. There are better ways for us to be doing things, and that's where we're really focused. And it is a delicate balance, and we're doing it based off of operational risk to mission, where we must maintain some of the legacy stuff, but where do we see that opportunity to drive forward? And so that's really how we're getting after tech debt. We are not looking at tech debt in isolation, because I would submit to you that will drive us down the wrong path, and it will make us, again, suboptimize what needs to be essentially a brand new architecture. And so the trick is, everybody knows how big the Army enterprise is, and all the other services will say that as well. You can't just greenfield everything. But in the end, what you need to do is, while you're brownfielding it, you're essentially turning it green. I think the perfect example is what we've done with Army 365. A completely different capability that we employ a completely different way that has enabled mobility and security to a degree that we've never ever seen it before. And then we forced it down on the echelons as opposed to how we did it in the past. We try and fix tech debt locally and try and build it up. I would submit that's a bad approach.
Hey, sir. Thank you for those comments, sir. Hey, Robert, I'm going to pass it down to you. As the owner of the Afloat Networks, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, afloat and ashore, but break. I think one of the things that we really need to get on with is digital engineering. And as a chief engineer for the Navy Information Warfare Enterprise, it's hit or miss across the board. But if everybody was, completely embraced in digital engineering, and I had modern and high fidelity MBSE models for the systems and capabilities, and I was trying to field and deliver, I could do my engineering, my integration, my interoperability. I can increase the capability. What I tell my engineers generally is it will set us free and let us move orders of magnitude faster than we're moving today. And until we get there, we're going to be stuck in the hundreds of Excel spreadsheets that engineers have to sift their way through to find that needle in the haystack to figure out how to do their engineering to make this stuff work. So that's one big step forward. Another one is, and the general touched on it, and I'm going to reiterate it because it is a real challenge, is we've got to get out of the tech refresh mode of things, which is I've got all this sunk cost fallacy infrastructure in place and I can't afford to get rid of it. I can't afford to turn it off for a picosecond. And I need to just, kind of modernize it in place and keep the same architecture from 20 years ago. And we're taking a much more aggressive approach about a clean slate, modern IT architecture and design. Would like to leverage the digital model, the MBSE digital engineering efforts to get us there faster, and to abstract the hardware and the software and let industry drive what it is we field and deliver. You see out here on the floor some of the most cutting edge, phenomenal IT technology, and we say because of our processes and the sunk cost fallacy and all these other things that it's going to take me 20 years to get there. Not any longer. It's going to take us. We're going to start embracing these things like right away, and we're going to look at IT and the industry telling us how to field this capability instead of continuing to perpetuate the way we've been doing in the past, or we're never going to get out of this cycle. And the other big thing is we want to go and deliver warfighting capabilities, smaller capabilities, much, much faster. And that requires us from a procedural perspective to address, to dial our risk to a level. Sometimes somebody's in the approval chain, they don't want to take any risk because 18 years ago they saw something bad happen. We kind of got to get over ourselves. We got to address the processes, the procedural environment that we live in, and attack anything that doesn't really add value and contribute to delivering that warfighting capability that our warfighters need.
Hey, Robert, thanks for those comments. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now towards the other component of C4, cyber, for cyberspace operations and mission assurance. And Brian, I'm going to hand this one over to you. Really from a service perspective, how are you postured today in USINDOPACOM to protect your critical infrastructure and key resources?
Yeah, I think Coast Guard's in a bit of a unique position, right? So we have more than just Title 50, we have 14. So we've got a variety of authorities that we wield to support the joint mission. We have, in fact, we just took on a port security authority as well. So there were some executive orders that came out naming the U.S. Cyber Commander as the port management. So we are fielding a variety of different capabilities. We've got cyber protection teams, we've got cyber mission teams that are working within ports all across the U.S. and its territories, trying to understand threats, trying to make sure that we can move logistically everything that needs to move. We are also partnering with local and foreign law enforcement across the country on a variety of missions that the Coast Guard has. Doesn't necessarily look like your traditional, Title 50 military service things, but building partnerships with all of our first and second island chain partners, looking at things like illegal fishing, helping them with building treaties helping them with understanding where and how their natural resources are done, and then actually working and going out with Navy strike groups, bringing the cutters into theater, being in places where other parts of the military can't be. We're able to do things like bringing in C2 information, bringing in and supporting forward deployed C2 capture for the strike groups. So it's really interesting. I have a background with the Navy for a long time, but coming over to the Coast Guard, it's been really interesting looking at how law enforcement and military service can work together and what that means to the cyber posture of the nation. And I'll close with just one last thing where we're really, really focused on cyber is in the development of the cyber campaigns that we're doing for the domestic resources. One thing that gets lost in any sort of a threat environment is if you can't keep the homeland secure, you can't keep anyone secure, and you're going to lose the fight in the homeland for hearts and minds. That is as critical as any mission that anybody's going to do. And I think looking with law enforcement partners in the domestic is definitely something that the Coast Guard looks at as a huge issue.
Hey, Brian, thank you for those comments. Nathan, I'm going to pass it down to you as the newest member, Indo-PACOM from a Space Force perspective. As cybersecurity and mission assurance relates to space-based and ground stations, what is your aspect on how you're protecting that from a J8 perspective?
Well, thanks, sir. I think in a couple different ways. One, we have cyber squadrons and cyber deltas. That's our organizational construct in the service, with the sole goal of doing defense and monitoring of that critical infrastructure right now. Then, as the service looks into the future, we are actively considering and taking approaches in our budget positions for those systems that can enable continued and assured support to the joint and allied warfighter across the spectrum of conflict. So we understand the need and the reliance that our blue forces have on space-based communications and other systems and that critical infrastructure. We also understand red reliance and increasing reliance on the same. So as we move forward, there are systems that the service is providing, one of which is through the Space Development Agency, their Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture, PWSA. To move at a speed of industry, their tranches of new vehicles are coming out every 2 years because it gets after what General Morrison was saying. The kind of tech debt that by its nature builds up, we have to move at a faster pace so that we can maintain the security and assured provision of services. And PWSA is one way that the service is doing that. Their tech roadmap is online, it's open, because the thought is we want to be more collaborative with industry, with academia, and across the services. So we're bringing forward new capabilities on a timeline that, at least for DoD, is remarkably fast. In the space side, every 2 years, a new tranche of services. And then I would say that while we are, and we'd consider that we are the defenders of the ultimate high ground, part of that is really U.S. Space Command being an integral part as another combatant command doing a protect and defend mission for those critical nodes on orbit that directly affect the terrestrial fight. Because, and I'm paraphrasing one of our Indo-PACOM leaders here, it only matters where the people are. And we get that being out here, that infrastructure that's on space has to be secure, it has to be reliable, it has to be resilient to enable the joint and allied warfight here terrestrial.
Hey, thanks, Nathan. I appreciate that. So the conversation across the services here, we held our first U.S. Indo-PACOM Network Defense Summit just a few months ago. The team is really developing a cross-service DoD and non-DoD network defense roadmap, and our next network defense summit will be March 2025. So please feel free to reach out to the team at Indo-PACOM J6 if you're an organization that wants to participate in that. But I'm really looking forward to the partnerships here at the table to pull in all those equities to make sure that we are properly aligning across the theater, creating those efficiencies to get those desired outcomes. So I appreciate that. So gentlemen, just a very broad softball at the very end here. Really just, it's been fascinating listening to the initiatives that everyone has spoke to. I appreciate the collaboration. For me, being in the job just 3 months now, I'd really ask from an Indo-PACOM perspective, is there anything that you need more from a strategic perspective, strategy alignment, directive, guidance, to help us leverage your capabilities and your strategy from a service perspective? Lieutenant Joe Morrison, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I will start with probably the 800-pound gorilla, which is JADC2, right? I think anything that we can do to understand what the C2 picture needs to look like, if we can understand exactly where and how the C2 needs to be leveraged, if we understand more about what the dimensions of tracks and targets of operating dimensions are going to be, I think we are, so for the Coast Guard, we're taking on a sort of a 2.5-year look at our C2 capabilities. So we're doing what's called Next Gen C2. It is a whole look at a different way of developing C2 capabilities for us. We are building it with a data-first mentality. So we're not building a bunch of C2 systems. We're building a bunch of C2 data services. We're thinking about where and how sensors are going to live and move across the domain. We're trying to understand where and how that data needs to be leveraged. And then finally, we're trying to understand exactly how to share, how to move that data across. We partnered with CBP and the Navy on Minotaur, so bringing Minotaur as sort of that suite of airborne. We're using the afloat version on our cutters. We're pushing it out into our partners so that we can figure out exactly how to bring C2 quickly in domain and in context for everything that we do. So for us, I think really the biggest thing is more understanding of where and how C2 is going to play in the space, and then really understanding what are the demand drivers going to be for C2, because I think that is what's going to make or break the ability to operate.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Robert, over to you, sir.
Yeah. First, I want to say, because it's come up a few times, that the relationship between the Navy and the Coast Guard is absolutely fantastic. And Brian and I work together all the time, and we share and collaborate with them very, very closely. Now, I saw him on the panel. I was pretty stoked. So him and I talked before we actually got up here. We talk all the time anyways. With respect to the strategic point, I'd say is, from a Navy perspective, it's like message received. We're making some significant course changes and we're doing a lot of things different we wouldn't have done if we didn't get some strategic direction from Indo-PACOM on how we're going to go and work together as a naval joint and even coalition enterprise. So our focus is Indo-PACOM, and we're putting a lot of cycles and energy into it. And Admiral Paparo came from PAC Fleet up to Indo-PACOM, and so we understand where his head is. Plus, the AOR has a little bit of water in it, being facetious. And it's always kind of like the base, the foundation of a maritime fight comes out of this AOR moving forward. So we're very much keyed into the bigger picture and how we contribute and support that moving forward.
No, thanks, Robert. Hey, Nathan, down to you, buddy. So from a Space Force perspective, what is something that Indo-PACOM can provide you to help get you aligned with the C4 modernization effort?
I think one of the things is I will second the Navy. It hurts me a little bit to do so, but the Space Force is all in on Indo-PACOM, great power competition, and enabling the joint fight in a way that's assured. I think as we move forward and we look at the Department of the Air Force's battle network and how that gets built out in the future, ensuring that that is in lockstep with the Joint Fires Network, making sure that what we are doing on the DAF battle network and the JFN are aligned and mutually supportive so that moving forward, our interconnected C2 is seamless to the end user. I think that is a real key thing. We understand that is a huge effort for Indo-PACOM, so therefore it's of immense interest to the service as well.
Thanks, Nathan. Sir, lastly, over to you, sir.
I'll be direct.
Yes, sir.
You know, where I think I think we have a unique opportunity. We have a lot of service initiatives happening inside this AOR. But I don't think they're near as integrated and synchronized as we can possibly make them. And I think that's where Indo-PACOM, and I really want to really hammer home on the command and control ConOps, because form needs to follow function, not the network drive how we do command and control. I'll be candid, in the Army, that's what got us jacked up for, that's a technical term, by the way, for many, many years, because we would field a capability and we would try and adjust how we would do the art of command and control to the network. And as we've implemented C2 fix across all those echelons that I talked about earlier, we have flipped that. Operational commander, how do you want to command and control your formation? And we'll make the bits and bytes aligned to it. I think that's the opportunity we have here. There's a synchronization of our modernization efforts. There's an ability to start driving the real command and control, the art of it conversation from a joint perspective. And then what I would ask is no more one-offs. You know, none of the services can afford to go into 6 different combatant command AORs where the architecture is fundamentally different. It actually disaggregates the force at a time where we really need to aggregate and integrate the joint force. And so I think there's some real opportunities here in front of us. And I would just caveat one last piece. I think it's on the cyber side as well. You know, there's a lot of synergy that we can gain both from a DOT and ops perspective and from a defensive cyber operations perspective, that if we bring all of our capabilities to bear, we know inherently as a joint and combined force, we're far more effective than if we're just the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Space Force, or the Navy. I apologize if I pontificated a little bit.
No, sir, that was fantastic. So for the team, the original question was really me asking the panel members, what can they do more for Indo-PACOM? But it's really about, you know, what can Indo-PACOM do from a joint warfighting perspective, synchronizing and integrating these effects across the services to actually enable that CJADC2 and C5 ISRT. But what I'll say is, one thing that we've done recently is we've started a C4 executive board, a monthly board. It's been ongoing for a while, but that's really getting ramped up where the services are each going to come in and brief their C4 modernization running estimates so we can identify those gaps and seams and eliminate some of that duplicity. And we have also started that same effort with our allies and partners from an interoperability perspective. So, gentlemen, I greatly appreciate your time, your feedback, your commitment to service, and your commitment to US-Indo-PACOM. Before we say thank you, we'll open up the floor for any questions for any gentleman up here on the stage.
All right. Morning, sir. So we have a few questions. The first question is going to be, what are the different C4 capabilities you need to trust UXVs operating in the hybrid fleet, and are there any of these gaps?
That's you guys.
Can you
I'd say
please repeat
the answer is
question?
yes. Not really sure what I can talk about
I mean,
openly. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I can give, so if we're thinking about how we're going to do hybrid operations, right, there's a couple of things that we need to start with, which are we need capabilities that we can deploy quickly. We need capabilities that are integrated. We need capabilities that we can fit into those legacy assets that we've got, because the timeline is super short. If I think about from a Coast Guard perspective, we are taking on the largest shipbuilding effort that the Coast Guard has had since the 40s. We are investing in putting together new classes of cutters. We are looking at investing in trying to bring new capabilities that will be support down the road in the 27 to 29 timeframe. but I still have a lot of capabilities that I need to field in C4 into those legacy assets. So where I'm looking for support, where I'm looking for things that I can do today, things that I can do tomorrow before we get to 27 to 30 time frame is, I need things that I can integrate in. So I need people thinking about what assets do we have, what gaps do we currently recognize that we've got, and what can I use to fill those gaps so that I can get to a timeline for 27 to 30. I could point out, we've got radar issues, we've got communications band issues, we've got communication aggregation issues. If industry's looking for places where we can do internal R&D, or if you're looking for places where you can find new niche capabilities to bring, look at where the gaps exist today. We need to fill those gaps while we're looking at the next generation of capabilities.
Yeah, I'll add that there will be plenty of opportunities for industry to participate in addressing specific areas associated with USV and USX capabilities moving into the future. We're putting a lot of time and energy into our transport with the context of understanding that this is going to grow significantly into the future. So a lot more to follow in the context of how we're going to start bringing in and growing that mission area into the future.
Do we have any additional questions?
Yes, sir. The next question is going to be talking about zero trust. Vendors are advertising many great zero trust capabilities, which work great if we're building up the enterprise from the ground up. How would you advocate for funding and risk acceptance to make the existing enterprise networks zero trust capable?
So I don't, you guys may disagree. I don't think any of us cannot move down the path towards zero trust principles thinking that we're just going to wipe the slate clean of our current capabilities. It's just not how it's going to work. And it goes back to that risk calculus we were talking about earlier. How do you maintain what you need to with your legacy systems while you aggressively seek to modernize with, and what I did love about what all the panel members said, was zero trust, which is really cybersecurity baked in on the front side. 10 years ago, we probably weren't having that conversation. And so it's that delicate balance that you need. Now, what I will tell you is that zero trust is not a thing. It is a guiding set of principles, and there are a lot of capabilities that need to be integrated into that capabilities will end up being things that need to be integrated into it, but more importantly, operationalized. And what we all clearly need to understand are what are the interdependencies as we move down that, because it's got to be about a coherent architecture. But you're seeing a different level of integration that is happening than in the past. In the past, at least from an Army perspective, we'd hire some lead system integrator and say, deliver us a thing. Well, when you can get things now as a service, and it allows you to move very fast, and then there's things that you actually do need to procure that, because they have to go somewhere with a tactical formation, it's how do you do that level of integration, and it's got to be absolutely operationally driven. It cannot be technically driven anymore. Again, form's got to follow function. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I'd say that to follow the general, super complicated question. The answer truly is it depends. There are a lot of facets, like the general said, to zero trust, and I don't know, we can't measure it all comprehensively and objectively to say, you're 100% zero trust or you're not. And then in the context of what you need, there may be an element or two of that zero trust that aren't even required in your system. So we have to understand, we're all embracing zero trust. We're aggressively pursuing strategies and actually delivering parts and pieces of it today. But at some point we got to figure out how to objectively measure and assign scores, for lack of a better term, to different zero trust solutions. And we got to think about how we're going to field and deliver zero trust from an integrated cybersecurity capability perspective, and how it contributes to the DCO, the Defensive Cyber Operations mission, and our ability to operate our networks and command our networks moving forward. So I think, and then once again, as the general said, is we're not going to go, okay, only a greenfield solution will be zero trust. Everything else we're just going to limp along forever with. we're going to start applying these principles to our legacy capabilities as much as we possibly can, as fast as we can.
If I could add just one more comment, and then I'll turn it over to you, Brian. By disaggregating these capabilities, I will submit to you 2 things are happening. One is we've long talked of this notion of you're never complete with network modernization, right? But we've always, at least from an Army perspective, tried to hit this home run with these big PORs. But now that base architecture has been established, that we truly can start iterating capabilities as we move forward. I think that is one of the things that is great about what is happening right now. And for industry, that presents a lot of opportunity, because the reality of it is I don't see us living on a given network capability for years and years and years and years and years. As new capabilities and technologies come along, based off of the C2 construct, it will continue to evolve as we move towards multi-domain operations. We'll spin capabilities out and roll new ones in. And that's going to be a different business model for all of us, but we all need to get comfortable with it. I don't know if there's anything you
No, so sir, that was exactly where I was going to go is, if you think that you are going to achieve zero trust, I think you missed the point of zero trust. If you're looking at a vendor to deliver you a box of zero trust, I think you missed the point of zero trust, right? The point of zero trust is that security is a constant progression of getting better. It is an operational mentality. It is an idea that we have to continually address identified vulnerabilities. We have to continually address understanding the threats that are there. We have to continually try to make our networks better, because we are going to continue to evolve them. We are going to continue to evolve our operations. So, I think zero trust was great because it did a couple of things. It forced us to rethink the way we understand security, so that security is not an ATO. It's not a one point in time evaluation of whether your system's secure. It is a constant progression of security. And zero trust sort of puts out these mandates that say, if you are evaluating a system today, here's what you look at. But you have to come back and think about it again. You have to continually monitor it. You have to continually look at new vulnerabilities that are coming, and you have to have ways to do those continuous evaluations, those ideas of ongoing authorization, right? We can talk about the pillars, and we can talk about all the evaluated controls, but at the end of the day, zero trust has to be a mental shift into a constant operation of security, not a single point in time evaluation.
That's good. We appreciate the feedback and comments. We have time for one more question.
Yes, sir. The next question, so the last question, wants to discuss the importance of Pleo constellations to next-gen C2 goals and successes. How do you view systems like Starlink and Starshield, and are there any other readily available capabilities for the joint forces inside the Indo-Pacific Theater looking beyond SpaceX offerings?
So it's an Army question? No. Okay. Yeah, SpaceX is awesome as a vendor goes, just where they've positioned a couple of their systems, as mentioned, whether it's Starshield, Starlink, really great. And I'll put a period there. What I'll say is P-LEO across the board, so proliferated low Earth orbit, for those of you who don't speak space acronyms. Those low orbit constellations offer many opportunities. And the service is looking beyond SpaceX. There are numerous companies that are providing commercial offerings that are of interest to the Space Force. And the reason for that is disaggregation, dissemination, and proliferation. That changes the adversary calculus when it comes to targeting U.S. nodes, whether they be on orbit or terrestrially. So whether it's a ground gateway that we have to look at defending from a cyber perspective as well as a physical security perspective, to on orbit, that can be a challenging target solution to develop. I think as we move forward, having multiple different P-LEO options, so that's SDA's PWSA, as I mentioned, that's the NRO is fielding some, the National Reconnaissance Office, apologies again, is fielding some options, and so is the Space Force. We're moving forward with really a hybrid commercial military approach when it comes to SATCOM in the future. there will be multiple opportunities for industry to engage on that because the tech refresh cycle is not what it used to be when I started in space in acquisitions, which was build and launch a vehicle that's going to be on orbit for an expected 10-year design life, and hopefully we can fly it for 12 or 15. The cost to launch has come down through multiple providers. We see launch rates continuing to go up, and launch rate projections in the future are kind of eye-watering from a space person's perspective on the quantity of vehicles on orbit. So the whole paradigm, I think that's kind of been a theme here as well. The paradigm is shifting not just on cybersecurity and modernization of our C4 infrastructure, but internal to our own service, the paradigm is shifting on where we put engineering time and money when you know that your refresh cycle is so much shorter than it used to be. So yeah, PLEO and the benefits of proliferation, I think, cannot be overstated. That's clear to blue. It's also clear to red, and protection through dissemination, I think, is really the way of the future.
I would just add, I think it's bigger than PLEO. I would submit to you that from an Army perspective, we will never ever deploy with a military-only network ever again. You know, when I was a much younger man, that's exactly how we did it. We picked everything out of the motor pool, we deployed to wherever we were going to go, and we set up our own, you pick a telco vendor. That's just not the world that we're going to live in. And for our industry partners, that's going to require a completely different conversation because it's shared risk. And if something happens in that environment, whether it's PLEO, whether it's cloud-enabled capabilities, we all need to understand who's doing what to support, in some cases, very tactical operations. You know, when we went back when we sent the 18th Airborne Corps to Europe, we were landing in countries where we were not quite sure what their security architecture was. Those were very uncomfortable conversations for us both, but they need to become a matter of routine. And we're going to need to share that risk and completely understand it, and then, you know, Lord forbid, if there's an incident that we all need to address, we know exactly who's doing what, because our adversary will be looking for those gaps and seams that we've been talking about.
If I can jump in, and I can tell you want to as well, I think to that end, it's not a military-only architecture, it's commercial and military, and that involves space systems, so spaceborne, you know, on orbit, but it also means hybrid ground terminals, which allow for commercial and military access, and interchangeable and multi-systems. So the opportunities, I think, are really expanding exponentially and quickly.
Yeah, and I want to shift here. For one thing, we could do a whole panel discussion on that one question alone and then some. I believe it's a transformational event that's unfolding in front of us that I haven't seen in my 35 years working in the DoD as an engineer in information warfare and communications. And not to say it's the be-all, end-all, but and I'm not even going to look at it, the warfighting utility of it and the potential of that is tremendous, I'll give you that. And we'll take all comers, not just who's up there in orbit today, but I mean, Amazon and others are launching. The SDA's very, very busy. Derek Trenier and Crow doing great work. So, but I'm just looking at it from the CNO has warfighting, warfighters, and foundation as her three focus elements. In the warfighter element, you send a 19-year-old kid out to sea for now 9-month deployments. Come join the Navy and turn yourself off from the rest of the world for 9 months is not going to be really good on our retention numbers. So how do we keep our sailors connected? Oh, by the way, how do they deal with their banking and they deal with their future progression and training? Just the fact that we can put this capability on a ship and it gives us that much bandwidth to allow sailors to conduct their quality of service elements for recruitment, retainment, and for the proficiency of our sailors. Just that one little thing by itself is a huge increase, leap forward in where we were 10 years ago compared to where we are today to put our money where our mouth is and how we support our sailors and want to retain and grow the foundation of our workforce moving in the future. So just that one element, it's a complete game changer, and it does things in other areas too.
So gentlemen, thank you for those fantastic responses. To the audience, thank you very much for your participation in the Military Department C4 Modernization Panel. To the panel members, thank you, Connie, for your time, your wisdom, and more importantly, your service. And with that, please hand them a round of applause. And that concludes the panel. Thank you.